In the fundamentals of the faith, the further I go in it, we call it fundamentals, but it gets pretty deep pretty quickly. We've considered so far Jesus being both Lord and Christ and Savior and King. And we were considering 2 weeks ago the fundamental truth, which is a glorious one, in fact, that he is our high priest, a perfect high priest. I just want to tag up with the end of that, and then we'll move into a bit of discussion about him being our king, and then also Jesus being our friend. There's that marvelous song that we sing, "There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus," which is exactly why he is our friend and how he made us his friend. Let's consider again, go to the book of Hebrews. We've considered Hebrews chapter 2 and chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 7, we see that Jesus there, chapter 7, verse 23 and 24. Jesus is uniquely qualified as a high priest because he serves forever. He is immortal, and his salvation then is everlasting. It's not like the Levitical priesthood where men were appointed to serve only for a year. This is a perennial service. I was thinking of it like flowers in the yard. There's annuals that you have to plant every year. His service is perennial. It is forever. And the life that we have in him is also intended, the hope is forever. Well, the Hebrew writer continues to drive hard this point. In the Hebrew letter, you're scarcely ever more than a chapter away of some reference to the high priest. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 1. The writer's been building this case for some times, and now he's really driving the point hard. Hebrews 8, verse 1, "Now in the things which we are saying, the chief point is this, that we have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, not man." Well, then he goes into explaining the difference of those earthly priest and the high priest, but I want to consider this verse in verse 1. It may not sound like an important word to us, but that little word, such. My translation of the ASV says, "We have such a high priest." Does yours have that, Roger? Doesn't sound like, that is a superlative adjective. That, if you can't think anything higher to say, or there's not quite a word for it, you say, we have such a high priest as this. A unique kind of quality in this high priest, such as one who is qualified to be both priest and king. And so we are confident, as we considered in Hebrews 4 and verse 16, that such a high priest that we're confident to draw near to the throne of grace. In chapter 8 and verse 1, Jesus himself reigns in majesty. Jesus is with God there at the right hand. He is in effect there described as seated on the throne of grace. In fact, with God, he in fact becomes the throne of grace. We considered, I believe, 2 weeks ago when when it's said as it is in the original language so specifically, the throne of the grace, that's a description of God. And so Jesus as a high priest is not only the means to grace, with God he is also the source of it. So there he is, reigning as king with God. And we see there that unlike in ancient Israel, priests and kings were a separate role. What happens in Jesus Christ? All these things come together. We see it in so many of the descriptions. He's not only Lord, but he is king. He's not only a king, but he is high priest. He's not only the means to grace, he is in effect the source of it. And so it all comes together. And really the Greek way of saying that is we have such a high priest. Like you can't stack up enough superlatives to explain how wonderful that is. We need such a one, don't we? Certainly those people to whom that letter is written. What's the danger? If they're departing from the faith, what's the danger? That high priest, our high priest, can go before God and he can serve in all the glorious ways that he can serve. But if you're not steadfast in that conviction, whatever he's doing before God doesn't apply to you, does it? What his mediating, his work depends on a steadfast confession. If you go just one chapter over to chapter 9, verse 11 and 12, here really completes the essentials of being the high priest, such a high priest. Chapter 9, verse 11 and 12. But Christ, having come a high priest of the good things to come, through the greater and more perfect tabernacle. What do we just read in chapter 8? Who pitched the tabernacle? Jesus pitched it himself. Now, in that same tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation, nor yet through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood, entered in once for all into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption. He goes on to explain really the difference between bulls and goats and the sacrifice of Christ. He entered that place by the perfect means into that place, in that place where he brings that once for all offering to God in the Holy of Holies. We talked about it some last time when that curtain was rent from top to bottom, spread out like two wings and opening the way into the inner place. This is the first time it's referring to the offering is no longer made outside. It was in the old system was burned outside, then the priest went in. What's different now? The offering's brought directly inside, right before God's presence. In the old system, of course, it was animal blood. But it's not good enough to be offered inside directly to God. And so Jesus entered into that place by the effectiveness of his own blood. And when you think about it, if it wasn't effective, that way would have never been opened, would it? If it wasn't effective. I was thinking it really is amazing what God required of his own son. When you use the word son, we're really talking about the one who is of the same nature as the Father. So his son, we know, came from the Father. How does he go back? What did he have to do in order to get to go back? He came from the Father, but he has to die in order to make open a way for us to come before God. And only then can he return. Now, when you talk about the service of a perfect high priest, that's it, isn't it? referred to that song a few minutes ago. There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus. There's a lowly high priest who knows he can only return to his Father if he makes a way for us to go to the Father first. Quite a picture, quite a marvelous truth of what God required, what had to be opened before there was a way open for Jesus to return. In that way is our eternal redemption. In Hebrews 9 and verse 24, what do we learn of this high priest? Summary statement. For Christ did not enter into the holy place made with hands, like in pattern to the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear before the face of God for us. He goes on to explain not to offer himself yet again. That offering has been made, but there Jesus is the true one. What should those Hebrews at the time understand from this? Don't dare to think that you're going to stand before God trusting in anyone else, trusting in any other religious system. It's true to us today, isn't it? Don't dare to think you're going to stand before God by praying to anyone other through any so-called canonized saint or through Mary or depending on anything else. It's not going to happen. As Jesus is presently there, entered there, and he is exactly where we need him to be, isn't he? He's doing exactly what we need him to do. He is active in our behalf in the place that we need him most. Why was he brought there? Because he made a way for us to also come there. How you doing, brother? Y'all having a good time? Yeah. Good to see you. Glad you're with us. We can even turn the lights on that other side if you. Jesus is exactly where we need him to be. So far we've considered in this that Jesus is God, he is Lord in Christ, he is priest and king. What else will he be? Judge. Judge. He's mediating now, isn't he? But in the future, when he appears again, what will he be doing then? Judge. It's why in John 15 and verse 22, Jesus said, "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin." That's why Acts 17 and verse 30 says we have to do something, don't we? We don't have any excuse. What do we have to do? The time of ignorance is past. It's time for all men everywhere to do what? To repent. To repent. So, when we consider that Jesus is also going to be judge, let's turn to Romans 2 and verse 16. Romans 2 and verse 16. You guys don't have to let me do all the talking. Y'all can jump in. I know some of this is material that you have insight into, and be happy to share it with us. Romans 2 and verse 16. Speaking of the day when God shall judge the secrets of men according to my gospel by Jesus Christ. In context, it's about eternal salvation. Those who will be saved, in context back in verse 13. Speaking of those who are not only hearers of the law, or those who are, for not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. He's talking about the law of Christ there, isn't he? Those who are obedient to the gospel. Not only those who hear it, but those who do it. It is, as we read elsewhere, it's a law that is written on their hearts. And so, from the heart's best impulse of faith, then they are given to do what they have read. In Romans 2 and verse 15, by hearing and doing. Verse 15, in that they show the works of the law written in their hearts, their conscience bearing witness with it, and their thoughts one with another, accusing or else excusing them. What's he talking about? Thoughts one with another. Well, you would know the things that you ought to do and the things you ought not do, and you put it all together, and by the sum of that, then you have this conscience. You can know that you're prepared for the judgment. One thought with another. What's he say there? God's going to judge the deep things. The deep things of men through Jesus Christ. What's the problem with many people's thinking? Many don't understand, or many are thinking that just by belief in Jesus, I believe there was a man named Jesus and he did good things and he taught good things, that they're then prepared for judgment. What are they not understanding, really? They don't understand the gospel. This same word is the standard of judgment. It governs all things in God's household, as we read in the book of Ephesians, under the administration of our head. It governs all things in this household. What's going to happen in that judgment? He just said he's going to discern the deep things of men. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 10 and 11. Interesting how it's worded. 2 Corinthians 5, 10 and 11. We must all be made manifest before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body, according to what he has done, whether it be good or bad. You know, it's more than just making an appearance before God, like we're just going to pass by and walk on through. What's really going to happen? Talked about made manifest. The hidden things are all uncovered. How many times do we see that? The Old Testament, in Israel and Judah, in the Revelation, even in the among the Romans. What's going to happen? The wickedness, that adultery, that rebellion, all of it is going to be uncovered, often pictured like the harlot on a bed, and the sheets aren't long enough to cover up her nakedness. Everything is seen and known, and whether it is good or bad, it's exposed to be examined and to be judged. It is, of course, how Christ will determine who are the sheep and who are the goats, and just who it is he's going to present to his heavenly Father as priest and king and all the other roles. What do we know is going to happen after the judgment? 1 Corinthians 15, I think verse 23 and 24. What's going to happen? The one who now reigns as priest, or serves as priest and reigns as king, and will be our judge. He's going at that time to present the kingdom and give it back to the Father. When you think about all of this 2 Corinthians 5, this talk about the judgment. It's heavy. It's heavy. It's a hard message for people. It's fearful teaching. And it's meant to be. It's meant to be. And yet, thankfully, we know that Jesus, though he's our judge, he is our friend. He is our friend. He's our best friend. Anybody got a definition for a friend? How you doing, Steve? Good to see you. What's a friend? The world's definition from an Oxford Dictionary is a person you know well and like who is not usually a member of your family. That's interesting. Not usually a member of your family. Well, Jesus turns that a bit, doesn't he? Jesus is our best friend. Why? Because we are members of his family. Spiritually speaking, your BFF, as the people on their text messages say, your BFF, your best friend forever is Jesus. How do we know that? What's Solomon say about friends? Proverbs 17 and verse 17 is about friends who are like family. A friend loved at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. What do we know? Jesus, I don't want to be silly about this, but our best friend forever. He's more than a fair weather pal, isn't he? He gave himself to adversity, and he is certainly for ours. In Proverbs 18 and verse 24, it's again about the value of a friend in the same family. Solomon is speaking first of earthly friends. He says, he that makes many friends does so to his own destruction. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Interesting, consider, when you think about folks who remain faithful, who's your best friend? Someone in the world? Someone in your own family? Or someone in the church? When I mean best friend, the one who has your eternal well-being in mind, who's your best friend? In that sense, it's not in my family, my earthly family. It's not in the world. The folks that care for me in the church. Most of all, Christ. Now, it's not exclusively one or another, but what do we gather from Solomon's instruction? If most of your friends are outside the church, then the likelihood is that with them, you're headed for destruction. That's what he's warning when he writes the Proverbs. That's what he's warning his own sons about. Their wild, riotous, foolish way of living, not seeking after God, not seeking for knowledge or wisdom. And what's the warning? Then, with those worldly friends, you too will head to destruction. Another good passage about friends, Proverbs 27 and verse 9. Proverbs 27 and verse 9. Oil and perfume rejoice the heart. So does the sweetness of a man's friend who comes with hearty counsel. With hearty counsel, he's making a difference between your friends in the world and with those who are interested in your spiritual well-being. What's it mean by hearty there? The original word means someone that's coming to you with purposeful, substantive advice, spiritual counsel. You know, he talks about it being sweet, rejoicing of the heart. It's certainly sweeter than the news of the day or all the Facebook stuff and all the Twitter stuff. It's more fragrant because it indeed strengthens the heart. If you compare worldly friends to your true friends in the church, worldly friends just shoot the breeze. Your true friends in the church bring counsel to the heart. Tells us something about our conversation too, doesn't it? We can't all be about just shooting the breeze and what's going on. The value of a brother or sister in the church is speaking to the heart. I was thinking about Ruth and Naomi. In Ruth, the book of Ruth, chapter 1, verse 16 and 17. You know, one of them was of God. The other was pagan. It's beautiful what happens there. They became the best and closest family friends of the same family. That's what Ruth was doing. I'm going to be part of your family. Your family is so much better than the one of my deceased husband. I was thinking about our two sisters, Cindy and Connie. You know, that's rare in a family, even for cousins to be that close. Probably it is because they're cousins that they're best friend. And they truly do speak to the other's heart. Now, if your best friend is not in the world and not in your own biological family, who is he? Who is he? What's Jesus proving? I'm him. How is it that Jesus came to be a Christian's best friend? We're going to consider several reasons for that. How did it happen? By his humiliation, by his suffering, certainly by his death and his shed blood. Ultimately, he's our best friend because of the resurrection and because of his reign. And regarding all of that, according to what Solomon said, I mean, we should take this as a sweet fragrance to the heart. Hearty counsel in this. He is our best friend because of passages like Luke 19 and verse 10. Because he came to seek and to save that which was lost. Came to seek and to save that which was lost. I was thinking about that. It seems a little bit strange, or did to me, in the way it's worded. That which sounds a little impersonal. But it's correct the way it's said, because it's very accurate, it's very specific, singularly to save perfectly you and perfectly you and perfectly you and me, to save personally that which was lost. Our soul was lost. Family, his family again is best friends. What makes him our best friend? What do best friends do? Matthew 6, verse 33 through 35. I'm sorry, not Matthew. John 6, verse 33 and 35. Many of you will recognize as soon as they say John chapter 6 what that's going to be about. It's about Jesus being the bread of life. The true bread of life. John 6. You got it, Jeff? Would you read it for us?
33?
Yeah, through 35.
For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, from now on give us this bread. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty.
And refers to it again, same chapter in verse 68, if you would read that too, Jeff. 68.
Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? We have the words of eternal life. We believe and know that you are the Holy One of God.
Sing that song, Break Thou the Bread of Life. It's not talking about communion bread in that situation. It's talking about Jesus, the teaching, the word. You know, this is what Solomon would call hearty counsel. This teaching that gives rejoicing to the heart. Of course, the opposite is Jesus gives light, but the contrast in John 10 and verse 10 is the thief, the enemy, comes to destroy life. Certainly not a friend. There's 10 other passages we could consider about this, and if you want them all, I'll share those with you. But let's consider another reason he's our best friend. It's because he suffered humiliation, particularly the humiliation that we deserve. Few things are more painful than that, aren't they? Do you want to really be humiliated and brought to shame? Ever see that happening to you? In John 1 and verse 11, Jesus sought that we would be the best friend of his own family. What did he do? What's it say? He went to his own family. What'd they do? They didn't receive him. Again, I like the definition. Sometimes friends are not of your own biological family. But there he goes. He certainly came to seek and save them also. But you just can't give hearty counsel to those who will receive it, can you? You just can't. And so, nevertheless, did he suffer humiliation just for those who would receive him or for everyone? He suffered for all. You go back to the prophecy of Isaiah 53. In Isaiah chapter 53, one of the chapters of the suffering servant. Verse 53, or chapter 53, verse 3. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. As one from whom men hide their face, he was despised. We did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our grief. Let's continue down. If you go to verse 12. Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and was numbered with transgressors. And yet he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. What's implied in that? He's our best friend, because he caused the iniquity of everyone to fall on him, not just those who would receive him, but everyone. He came to seek and save all that were lost. What's the goal of that? What's the purpose of that? In 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 21. 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 21, when this is fulfilled, he came, he did all of that, so that we might become righteousness in him. In other words, what had to be done to make us God's family in Christ? In order for Jesus to make sinners best friends of sinners, it required his doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. We couldn't do to save ourselves. And so it required his own death. This is the third reason why Jesus is our best friend, his death and his shed blood. In John 15 in verse 13, it says a friend A friend will do what? Lay down his life for another. What's the next verse say? You got it, Jeffrey? 15, verse 14.
You are my friends if you do what I command.
Okay. What's implied in that? If you do what? If you lay down your life for another, you're his friend. That you lay down your life in service for Jesus as well to man. I was thinking about this phrase, lay down your life. It's equal to the phrase saying, take up your cross, isn't it? You know, people, you've seen through the years, people will walk along the highway dragging along. That's not what it's talking about. It's not specifically even talking about our mission. What's it talking about? If you'll lay down your life. It's the same thing. Take up your cross, be willing to lay down your life. You're willing to die for the sake of the gospel. In John 15 and verse 15 then. Interesting what happened. What's he explained there? John 15 and verse 15. While you're reading, Jeff, I'll let you continue. John 15:15.
I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you.
Did you ever have a boss tell you, you were supposed to do certain things on the job? I used to have a boss that always tell me, yours is not the reason why, yours is but to do or die. In other words, it's none of your business. You just do it. And true of a master and slave. It's not the slave's right to know all the master's business, is it? What's different about this case, spiritually speaking? Jesus has come to reveal not only his business, but the business of his Father. I mean, it's all just laid out. This is why I'm doing this. This is how I will make you to be my friend. I will prove to you I'm my friend. He's going to lay it all out. So that there's still a lot of things we don't know, but there really is no secret as to why Jesus came and what he would do to make us children of God. He reveals to the slave the master's business. Well, what's he reveal? How is it revealed? Paul recounts this. This will be a passage you know very well. I bet most of you can tell me what it says before we go there. Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 8. Let me give you a hint. What happened while we were yet sinners? While we were yet sinners, Christ demonstrated his love for us while we were yet hopeless and helpless. In other words, spiritually burdened and dying. He died for us. As we just considered those two phrases, he laid down his life. He took up his cross. It's amazing when you think about it. We were a mess. We were sinners and hopeless. In that case, the difference between Jesus as a friend and perhaps someone in the world being a friend. What do we tend to do? Rather than lay down for our life for someone who's helpless and hopeless, if we look at someone in that situation, what do we tend to do? Pardon?
Prejudge him.
Exactly. We're going to go to him. I'm going to tell you all the things that are wrong with you, Roger. I'm going to tell you everything that's wrong with you, and then I'm going to tell you if you'll straighten up your act, then I'll be your friend. It's not what Jesus does, is it? No, he takes you at your worst. Friend.
While we're yet sinners.
While we're yet sinners. You know, I wish I could say it doesn't ever happen in the church, but it does sometimes. Now, if you'll straighten up and fly right, we can be brothers. Not Jesus' attitude at all, is it? Doesn't mean that we don't have to straighten up and be changed. That's the wrong idea. In John 10 and verse 16, what Jesus did there at Rome in Romans 5, laying down his life to care for us. Now that he's made us his sheep, verse 16, he's made us his sheep. Is Jesus through there? What's there yet to do? What's Jesus still looking to accomplish? Verse 16. There are many more yet outside the fold, still to be brought under the covering of his shed blood. Still many outside. That's why Jesus is our best friend. I guess I'm going to have to stop it there. We're not quite through with that section. Anybody like to add anything to those thoughts about Jesus being our high priest or our king or our judge, our friend? Not typically someone in our earthly family, but Jesus has done everything possible to make us his spiritual family. Not a friend like the lowly Jesus. Well,